Well, I'm really excited, Chanelle, to welcome you to the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So, I always like everyone to just share a little bit about your story and really what propelled you to want to help women, moms in particular, to, organize their days, be less stressed and all of that because as moms, we're always trying to do like 1,000 things. We put everyone else in front of us and then we're like, how do we get everything done on our big, ridiculously never-ending to-do list? And then we're going to get into it. I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yes, that I want to talk about all those things, but I really got into it because I felt the need in my own life. I have five kids, and I had the first four really close together. So four kids within 6 years, and I just felt like I could not get a handle on it. And I was tired. I was grumpy. I was all the things. And it was just frustrating all the time. And you kind of look at it and like, is this how motherhood is supposed to be? Like you go into you become a mom because you want to have these kids. You want to have this relationship. You have this picture in your mind of what it will be like. And it definitely wasn't like that for me. I was exhausted. I was stressed out. I wasn't enjoying it. And I wasn't really being the person who I wanted to be. I found myself just grumpy with my husband, stressed out with my kids. And I knew something needed to change. And I made changes in my own life. But as I've seen that in other women, I realized I'm not unique in that. A lot of us go through that. And when we have tools to help us kind of find the balance and overcome some of those things, we can enjoy our motherhood a whole lot more.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're definitely not alone. And I wish so much of what I now know and practice, I would have been able to practice when my kids were so much, younger. But
Yeah.
again, you live and you learn, and you can always work to improve. But yeah, so let's get in and talk about this, feeling of failure that I know so many of us have. Some of us, I'm sure, more often, but I'm sure for everyone, there's at least been a point in time where, as a mother, you felt like a failure in one form or another. And so, like, why is that? Why, as moms, do we put so much stress on ourselves or pressure on ourselves? It's like then sometimes we're just left feeling like, oh my gosh, we failed everybody, or, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I think that part of that really comes from not having a clear definition of what we want to do in our motherhood. If you are climbing the corporate ladder, you kind of know, okay, after this job, I want this position, I want this salary raise, I want this. There are clear metrics of where you're going. In motherhood, it's pretty vague, right? You kind of have an idea like, I guess I need to keep the house clean. I know I need to keep the kids fed. I want happy, successful kids, but what does that really mean? We don't have a clear definition. And I think that what ends up happening is we go through the day. And just as humans, it's human nature to have more emotional attachment to the bad things. So I know for me, at night, I go into bed and I think, oh, darn it, that didn't go well. And no one liked the dinner I made. And I would say in general, I'm a pretty optimistic person and a happy person. But if we don't train our minds to focus on the good things, it's so easy to relive that argument you had with your teenager, or to remember the tantrum that your toddler was throwing when he was supposed to be getting in the car, or he couldn't find his shoes, or whatever it was. And those moments really add up to make us feel like we're failing. And so I think there's two things that I want to highlight. And one is, what is your definition of success in motherhood? I think that the more clear we get about that, the more we're going to be able to find it. So I think for me, for a long time, I kind of felt like motherhood meant doing all the things. And I keep a clean enough house, but I'm not like a super neat freak. My house has to be perfect kind of person. And yet sometimes I would still use that as the measuring stick. Like, oh my gosh, my house is not perfectly clean. I'm failing because I didn't define what success was for me in motherhood. Now I've defined it. Success for me is connecting with my kids. If I have connected with my kids during the day, then that is a successful day. That's being a good mom. That's what it means. And it might look a little different for each person, but how do you define it? Then you can know if you're even succeeding or failing. And I think if we don't take the time to really mentally think that through, we're always going to kind of feel like we're failing.
I love that. What does, you know, successfully mothering your children mean or look like to you? And I think
Yeah.
that it's so great as you're talking that I'm like thinking like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I've learned because I've done a lot of coaching work and personal development myself, and highly recommend it to everyone because it can absolutely change your life. And for me, one big thing is communicating with my kids from day one. I absolutely was like, I want to have open communication with my kids, even if that means we need to sit down and talk about things that like I'm really not ready to talk about yet with my kids, because I'm
Yeah.
like, ooh, you're only whatever age, but like, they're coming across things younger. And it's just I'm such a believer. Or if they're mad at you in the moment of just like, okay, well, maybe give them a little space and then let's revisit it later. And like, let's actually talk through what happened instead of just going to bed all grumpy with each other. And teaching our kids, because our kids have so much to learn from us as well. And I think that when we can reflect too. So I love that question. I absolutely love that question. I also wanted to reiterate when you were first saying about how we tend to gravitate towards the negative, right? And so
Yeah.
we understand like that's what the brain does. The brain tends to gravitate and likes that negative, the fear, the worry, the all of that. And so we have to learn to, what I always say about awareness is the first step, or you have to recognize if you're even doing that. And then we've got to retrain our thought process. So that's what I love. Chanelle, what are some of your tips to help our moms, like if they recognize, and maybe it's not on a daily basis or anything, but from time to time, they let all of it kind of like bottle up inside them and they're all stressed and they're all worried and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm failing my child because for whatever reason,
Yeah.
it's probably really silly. But how do we get, how can moms get themselves out of that cycle instead of just saying, oh, well, stop doing that? I mean, it's generally not that simple.
Yes. Okay. I love this. This is where I wanted to go next, because how do we overcome that? Like you said, it is our tendency to go there. It's our brain trying to keep us safe. Like, oh, this was bad. Let's try to avoid that. And yet what ends up happening is it kind of keeps us stuck in that pattern. And so what we need to do instead is look for those moments that are good. And I suggest writing them down. This is a practice that I've had for a while, is in the evening, I write down a few things, my wins for the day. Now, those can be business related, but they can also be motherhood related. And the more detailed you write those down, the more you get to relive them. So instead of writing, my win was, I had a conversation with this certain son, if you write down everything about it, like, Kyle and I sat on his bed and he told me all about his feelings for this girl. This is a true story that happened last night. And he wasn't sure how it was going to play out with her. And we had this conversation. And as I write this down, I'm reliving that and I'm emphasizing those positive emotions. And what that does for me as a mom is it lets me realize I am winning and I have a record of it. I can look back when things are just not going well in my day and I do feel like an absolute failure, or I go to bed at the end of the night and I'm like, well, today I can't even think of one win in my motherhood. Like, I'm racking my brain and I can't find it. And I have this evidence in my journal that I can say, but you know what? This happened yesterday and this happened the day before. And to write it down is really powerful. Now, I know some people aren't writers, but at the very least, you can train your brain at night to be grateful and to focus on those moments. Let those moments be the most powerful. And the only way that they get that emphasis is if we go out and search for them and we give them that emphasis. And it ends up, as you do that day after day, it ends up to be easier to find because your brain is, in the moment when I'm sitting with my son and snuggling and we're reading a book, I'm like, oh, this is my moment for today. This is what I'm going to write down. And I'm looking for that all throughout the day. So it becomes a powerful thing that kind of spreads throughout the whole day, the whole week, the whole month.
Yeah, I love that practice idea, and especially like the gratitude. And we talk about gratitude a lot because just a little switch of, even if it's just during your day, and especially for those that aren't big on writing, which is myself, but, throughout the day, having little moments of just, wow, that, moment I just had with my kid. I'm so grateful for that. And when we get in that cycle, it is amazing what can shift for you. And then passing that along to your kids, like that's so empowering to them, right? I think of like, I had a great childhood, but like just, you know, knowing that like I don't know that if I ever had the word gratitude shared with me, because I don't know that we really talked about, that. And so just thinking like how much we now know and we know how powerful it can be for our life as a mother, but then also we can pass these things on to our kids that they can start learning before they're even adults. And I'm like, that to me is
Yeah.
such a win as a mother to really reflect on being like, wow, my kids are going to be so much better set up for adulthood than, even I was, kind of thing. And I think that's just so magical and so exciting to think that way. And it's amazing how it can
Yeah.
shift, decrease our stress, ladies. Oh my gosh.
Totally. I would love to share an experience around that I had with my
Love that.
son. My 11-year-old son decided to play football. He had never played football before, and he really thought long and hard about it. And he decided to play starting this most recent summer. And they did 2 hour a day practices. Now he spends probably more time than he should indoors and was not really fit going into it. And he did all his early outs, and then they started actually practicing with the team. And he didn't get too far into it before he came to us. And he's like, Mom and Dad, I hate this. This is the worst. I really want to quit. And we were like, oh no, don't quit. Nielsen's aren't quitters. Like, we really don't want you to quit. And we had this conversation, but it went back and forth. And he told us, like, I already know I don't like it. It was really hard for us as parents. That's a whole nother story, to let him make this decision because he hadn't even played a game. Anyways, at the end, we did let him quit, and he felt so bad about himself, which was one of my concerns about him quitting. And I sat down and I wrote him a note, and I wrote down, here's why I'm grateful um, that you did football, even for a month. And I wrote down, you went out there and practiced, you learned this, you did these hard 2 hour practices that you had never done before. You gave that your all these things. And he just was everything changed for him, and he realized the benefit. Now, could there have been more benefit if he had continued? Yes, but not the point of the story. The point is, even when things are bad, we can find the good in it. And looking for that with our kids, it changed his whole outlook, because I think that he would have looked back and been like, well, that sucked. I'm never trying that again. Whereas now he's like, okay, that was still a positive experience, and I learned something from it. And it was a really powerful mother-son moment for us also.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
is. There's so much that we can instill and teach our kids, even if it is about just reframing the situation. So there's always, I would love talking about perspectives of things in
Yes.
life. I love my one of my kiddos is always about, like, he loves that word perspective. And it's so fun and exciting to hear that come out of your kid's mouth, where he's like, yeah, I was looking at it from this perspective and that perspective. And so it just comes down to like having these conversations and knowing that, you know, you have the power to shift anything, I think. But
Yeah.
I don't know, sometimes societally, I think it's just like you have all this to do, you get overwhelmed and you're like, then you feel like pulled in a gazillion directions. And then it's like, you don't even feel like you have the time to be that present to do something like that sometimes for a child, right?
Yeah.
And so, can we talk about that a little bit more? Because when you were opening up talking about how your house is clean enough. Like that's a huge thing, right? Because
Yeah.
with my core rehab program, right, I get a lot of women who are like, okay, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I can tell you how many times I've heard, I don't have the time to do, take care of myself. And I'm like, ladies, you all have the time to take care of yourself. And it's like, but there's dishes to do and laundry to do. And like the lists are endless.
Yeah.
And okay, I want you to talk about this. How do we shift that perspective so that it's like we don't feel like we have to have everything done and cross off our list before we can actually start taking care of ourselves?
Yeah. Okay. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So there's a couple things. First of all, I operate like this. Every day I have a big three. There are three things I need to get done. And guess what? Dishes and laundry never make it to that list because they're going to get done. If you don't have dishes, if all the dishes are dirty, someone will wash them. That someone might not be you. And yeah, that's not ideal, right? That is not ideal to have the dishes piling up on the sink. But you know what? What's the most important? This goes back to that idea of what success for you and your motherhood is. Success that all the dishes were immediately loaded into the dishwasher. Maybe it is, then maybe that is your big three, but it certainly isn't for me. For me, it's like, how can I make a difference in the lives of my clients and in the lives of my family? Those are the things that matter. So those are the kind of things that are on my big three. So prioritizing. I also love this analogy of, have you ever seen, this is like an object lesson that I've seen before. So if imagine a jar, an empty jar, and in it you pour some sand and it fills up about halfway with sand. And then you put in some small rocks and it's almost filled to the top with these small rocks, but you still have some big rocks you need to put in. Those most important things, those things that I just mentioned, your big three, you try to put those in and they don't fit. It overflows the jar. Now, this is something you can actually do. You can try this and figure this out, and it will work if you first put in the big rocks, then the small rocks, and then you put in the sand and you have to shift it around and figure out how it all goes, shift it a little, but the sand will trickle down and you can fit it all into the jar. And it's amazing. I love that because it is like that with our life. But if we prioritize the sand, which to me is the laundry and the dishes, what's going to happen is those things that are helping us become who we want to be, those things that are really vital and really crucial will get left undone. And some of those, like you mentioned, are self-care. That is absolutely a big rock. We have to do self-care. We have to take care of ourselves because if we don't, eventually we're not going to be able to do the dishes and do the laundry and take care of everyone else, right? We're going to be grumpy and stressed out and all those things that I talked about at the beginning. And so when we know what's important and we do that first, everything else will get taken care of.
I love your analogy with the rocks and the sand. Like I've heard that before, but in other way, like with some other analogy, I'm like, I really love that for motherhood and prioritizing. Like that's a really, really, really good example. And when you shift and we actually start focusing on what really is our most important things, then the other stuff becomes not the stressor. But I know some women are saying, but Erica, that maybe not, like laundry may not be at the top three, but like, the OCD or like it just has to be done, or I can't relax and I can't go sit down and do something with my kids or whatever it is. And I will say, please start making your kids do chores if they're old enough to do chores. Like
yes.
I cannot emphasize that enough. I mean, I remember growing up and I had friends who went off to college, didn't know how to do their own laundry. And I was like, what? Like I was doing my own laundry and cleaning dishes as soon as like I literally my parents could put me on a step stool and be like, here you go.
Yeah.
Here's how you wash dishes. Here's how you do laundry. And I think like, in the beginning, that can be hard. It takes more time to teach your kids how to do that. But, now I've got like a teenager, a preteen, and, a 9-year-old. And yeah, it's on a walk in the park. Some days it would be easier for me to do it, but I don't want them to have to rely on me to take care of them for the rest of their life. So even doing some of those things and empowering your kids to really help you. Like we have those conversations in the house. So like, look, like, Dad and I, we like why we work and what we're doing. And, we run you guys everywhere. And sometimes like, that's why I'm big on communication, explaining to them why, not just say, oh, you need to do the dishes because you need to do the dishes. Like, no, there's so much more purpose, right,
Yeah.
behind it. But how can women who, have that really hard time of like, no, but I have to get those dishes done. I have to get the laundry. The house has to be clean or I cannot function, even though that's not one of their top three priorities. Cause that's just like it's a thought process switch, but it's not easy.
Yes.
It's not easy. I know that.
Yeah, it's not. And that is, one of the things in coaching that I work on with people as a coach a lot is changing your thoughts. And when we started this portion of the conversation, you had said people say to you, I don't have enough time, or they're saying, I can't relax. Those are not facts. Those are not factual things. Those are thoughts that you are choosing. And a lot of times we it feels like it's not a choice. It feels like it's a fact. It feels like it's put upon you, but actually it's a choice. And it might be hard to change that choice. And that might be where a coach comes in to help you learn how to change those choices, but you get to choose that. And so maybe that means for a day, not doing the laundry and sitting with that thought and sitting with that feeling until you're ready to do the work and change that thought. I know for me, the one that you said, I don't have enough time. That was something I struggled with. I used to always, especially before my kids, now all my kids are finally in school. It's amazing. But before they were in school, I would think, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. I have so much to do. I don't have enough time. This would be the on repeat in my mind. And it wasn't until I have the same 24 hours now, but I switched the thought to I have an abundance of time. I have all the time I need. If you think about it, you have the same amount of time as Oprah or, anyone. We all have the same amount of time. All we can do is think differently about it, but that's enough. And that makes all the difference.
Yes, that's very powerful. And too have worked on that myself, and it makes a big difference. And it comes down to prioritizing. It really, you have to prioritize, and it cannot express whether it's in your work or as a mom or family or whatever it is. But it's like, instead of looking at this long to-do list of everything you have to do, we have to start prioritizing it, focus on the priorities. And then when you have a couple minutes here or there to do the smaller tasks, like, do them, right?
Yeah.
But I know that's easier said than done. So I don't know if you have any more tips or ideas for, and again, even like the thought reframing, right? If it's just more like creating that affirmation and just practice, practice, practice.
Yeah. So a few things. So first, I would say getting really clear on we talked a little bit about, getting clear on your definition of success, but I would even back up. One of the things that I work on with clients is creating a life vision, like beyond, how you want to feel as a mom each day. What do you want in your life? Like, what is the goal? What are you working towards? What do you, at the end of your life, what do you want to say you accomplished? And the more you become clear about who you are in the future, the more you can start living into that person today. So your future self is determined by you right now. And that's such a cool thing to think about. Dan Gilbert is a psychologist. He gave a great TED talk on this. And he said, human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're complete. We are all works in progress. And so what happens is we think, okay, I'm done. This is pretty much how I'm always going to be. And we don't look to the future. But if you do, if you have that big picture view, that's what allows you to, like you said, to prioritize, to get rid of those things that are unimportant. And that comes down to a lot of things. So on your daily schedule, what's going to actually come on there? Is it the stuff that matters to you right now, today? Like maybe my today self would choose a donut, but if I'm thinking for the future, I'm like, in tomorrow, 5 years from now, I'm going to be glad that I chose the salad and the leafy greens and all those things because I want health in the future. When we're thinking long term, we make better choices in the present. So that's one thing, is to really have the long view. And the other thing I would say is so we're simplifying our schedule. Yes, we're not letting everything on it, but also simplify your world, simplify your stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, dishes piling up in the sink. This is the true story. We have enough dishes for one load of dishes. If I mean, there's a couple more than that, like some big pots and pans and stuff. And I have a big family. There are 7 people living here. Um, if we don't do the dishes, we don't have dishes to eat off of. It can't pile up infinitely into this mess that's uncontrollable. And that has been very helpful. It seems counterintuitive, but the less laundry that you have, the better. It doesn't pile up so high that you don't even know what to do. You don't even know what you have. I have enough, underwear for a week, and then I have to wash them, and I have to do wash, and it just gets done because it has to get done. So when we simplify the things around us, as well as simplify our schedule, we just live in what really matters. And it shifts that whole perspective from running around frantic and doing all the things. And oh my gosh, there's so much to like, oh, this is manageable. This is doable. There's one load of dishes in the dishwasher. I better throw it in so we have some dishes for dinner. No big deal, right? It totally changes the way that it feels. And I think that's the most important part. It feels doable. It feels manageable. If I have 3 things on my list, that feels doable. If my schedule has a few things here and there, I can do that. And it's when it gets the other way that it becomes unmanageable and it feels heavy.
So I love all those examples. So what about for women? Because I hear this, right? And maybe they're a single mom, right? That they are working a full 40 hours, maybe even more. And, it's just them raising their kid
Yeah.
or kiddos and running around. And I know that, those situations can be more challenging because they don't have someone else to really help them. Do you have any extra advice for those people who really like when you hear their schedules, you're like, they're really not even home much. They're really like, there's not a lot of extra room, but everybody always has a little time
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. I hesitate to speak on this because I'm not a single mom and I do have a great supportive husband who can help me. But the only thing that I would say is to look very closely at the time that you do have. It's not going to be as much. And single moms do have more on their plate. And I have all the compassion for what they're dealing with. Um, but like all of us, there are stories that I'm sure they tell themselves, just like we tell ourselves, that are not helpful. And so, where are those places that you're telling yourself things that aren't helpful, that you're telling yourself you don't have enough time, that you're telling yourself you don't have, or it's not enough? Because what you have is enough, even if it feels tight. So where can you let go in your schedule? Where can you shift things, even if that's mental? But that's my only real thought on that, because like I say, I don't live that, but there is hope. You see some of these moms just doing it amazingly well. And don't let that be a stick to measure yourself and to beat yourself up with, but to say, okay, there's something for me to learn here and there is hope.
I love that. And so many times it's like finding that one thing, right, to start with. Like, what's
Yeah.
that one baby step that we can make? And maybe, it is just a simple thought shift of like looking at things with more of an abundance mindset or gratitude for what you do have. Because when we are living in that versus always living in the lack, like even that can just help to shift how days go into
Yeah.
just a much more of a flow state and less stress. And it's amazing that in time that can have such a positive snowball effect on your life and just things that are happening in such a good way. So I love that.
Yeah.
So, Chanelle, I know you talk about, like morning routines and organizing your day. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Okay. So I do love starting off with morning routine. That is one of my favorite things. because for moms, we are constantly getting stuff thrown at us. Things are happening all day. And the way that I like to think about it is we're constantly being asked to react. Mom, he hit me. Mom, I just got this assignment and I need help with it. Or, whatever, like things are coming at us all the time and we're reacting, When we put ourselves first in the morning and we have a little time to do what matters to us, and I really recommend a self-care morning routine, just taking care of those things that are going to matter for you in your day. When you do that, it allows you to act instead of react, or act instead of be acted upon. And so it's crucial to get up before your kids. And I get some flack about this, but I just need my sleep. And the only exception to that is if you have babies that aren't sleeping through the night, then yes, sleep in. You got to get your sleep. That's a different story. But if your kids are sleeping through the night, I'm not saying get up an hour and a half before your kids and have this wonderful, amazing, morning. But even if you just get up 10 minutes before your kids and you do something that matters to you, you will see a ripple effect throughout your day. You really will. It will change the way that you show up as a mom. And if you can manage more than 10 minutes, do more than 10 minutes. But the way that I think about how to structure your morning routine is to really say, what do I need that I'm not getting? Self-care, I feel like it gets a little bit of a bad rap, in that, oh, it's manicures and pedicures and massages and that kind of things. And it can be, but what self-care really is, to me, is pausing and asking yourself, what do I need? That is self-care. And you're the only one that can answer that. And so once you get that answer and you tune in and you listen to that answer, then take the time to do it. And so for me, my current morning routine is, it is about an hour. I get up before my kids. I journal. I read scriptures. I write any thoughts that come to me from the scriptures. I pray. I do yoga. And then I do a meditation. That takes about an hour and a half if it's like a Saturday and everything aligns and I can just slow down. But that makes a huge difference in how I show up. And I just look forward to it. It gets me out of bed in the morning still. I've done it for many years. And I still am excited to do it every morning. And so that's how I know I have the right morning routine. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, if I sleep in, I'll miss that. And I want to get up and do that.
So, but I'm guessing you didn't start out with an hour.
No. Okay. I didn't. And I started when I had my 4 that I mentioned that were really close together. They were young and I wasn't getting any time to myself. And that's when I started a morning routine. And I started with yoga, and I would just do, 10, 20 minutes of yoga alone by myself with the door shut before the kids woke up. And as they got older, I trained them. I literally would put a sign on the door that yoga's in progress. And it had a picture for those that were not readers yet, meaning you don't come in. I don't care. You go find some breakfast, whatever you need to do, but mom needs this time. And they were trained properly and they learned not to come in. And I made that non-negotiable. And even with young kids, it worked because it wasn't an hour, because it was short, right? They could handle it for just a short time. But yeah, it did start short and it grew. And I think that's another thing. We need to give ourselves permission for that, to start slow and let 10 minutes be enough if that's all we can do.
I love that. I preach that all the time. It's like a lot of the workouts I teach are 10 to 15 minutes. And I ask the ladies, I'm like, do you guys want me to create some 25, 30 minutes? Or no, keep creating 10 to 15 minutes, because they're like, but if I have more time, or I can just stack them on top. Right. And I'll do 2 or 3. So they end up at 30, 30-ish minutes a lot of times. But otherwise it's that 10 to 15 minutes, can be so powerful, whether it's a workout, whether it's a meditation, whether it's journaling, whether it's just getting up. Sometimes I just like to get up and drink my coffee and sit in silence and look outside at the trees, you know, like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be what everyone else is doing. And it can change every
Yes.
morning. But I think that even if it's like 2 minutes of quiet, some days, like it just needs to be something that's helping you to like breathe. I like just center yourself, because then when you are centered with yourself, man, it changes your entire day. And it is so, so, so true. And sometimes I know it's hard because it's like we're tired and you're like, I just want that 10 more minutes of sleep. But I'm like, I don't know if 10 more minutes of sleep is going to give you what you want versus like the 10 minutes of quiet or light movement or breath work or meditation, like whatever it is. Like it is so powerful. And it's just, it's the thought process, right? It's so much reframing. I love
Yeah.
teaching affirmations. Do you have affirmations that you love to teach your clients?
Um, Not really. I don't have like specific ones that I
Okay.
use, but what we usually do is work through their own affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
So work, like we talked about, changing that thought process. So going from where they are to where they want to be,
Yeah.
more than like a set
Yeah.
affirmation
Individual for
list.
each
Yeah.
one. So yeah, everyone can find their own that can resonate with you right now in the moment, and
Yes.
just start with baby steps. Well, Chanelle, this has been amazing. Do you have any other words of wisdom, tips that you want to leave everyone with that we haven't yet talked about today?
Yeah, I guess I would just end by saying, for moms, you get to choose, first of all, like what your motherhood looks like day to day. And you get to choose, like we talked about, that idea of what is going to define it as success. And let that, like, that's hopeful. That's powerful. You're the boss of that. Like, you get to decide, is this a success or is this a failure? And so often, moms come to me and they're feeling like failures without realizing they get to choose that. You get to choose how you feel in your motherhood. And so, yes, there are tools, there are things that can help, but ultimately decide how you want to feel and work to feel that way. You get there by changing your thoughts. You get there by really actively doing the work and putting in that effort to let it to show up the way you want to show up. And that's really powerful. It doesn't just, you don't have to go through life and just kind of float along and let things happen to you, even though it feels like that as a mom, like we talked about, and you're reacting to things. Instead, this idea of intentionality, being an intentional mom, deciding ahead of time what you want. And once you decide that, it's yours for the taking.
Oh, such good advice. Such good advice. So you share with everyone where they can find out more about you, if you want to mention what you offer, your books and coaching,
Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah.
For sure. So I'm going to say the best thing, we talked a little about morning routines today. So I am going to send you guys, go to ChanelleNeilsonCoaching.com. My names are hard to spell, so hopefully that can be in the show
Yes,
notes.
of course.
And okay, ChanelleNeilsonCoaching.com/morning routine challenge. And that is a morning routine challenge that I do. It has, over the course of the week, it has different ideas that you can try. Each of them take 10 minutes or less to really help you start your own morning routine and experiment with different things and see what works for you to really just get started. Because once you start that, you start your morning routine, you're going to have this ripple effect, like we talked about, through your day, but also with this last idea of intentionality, with being more intentional, with going, okay, this makes a difference. What else would make a difference? Where else do I want to go? What else do I want to do as a mom, as a woman, as a human being?
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Chanelle. This has been so great. And hopefully, everyone listening can even just find one little baby step takeaway that she can start doing today. So, thank you.
Thank you.